A Russian soldier in Ukraine may now be in danger before he even reaches the front line. Not when he fires his rifle, not when he enters a trench. The danger can begin the moment he leaves a forest, rides a motorcycle across a dirt road, or hides inside an abandoned house, thinking the sky is not watching. This is the new battlefield Ukraine is building with drones. Units like Signum Battalion, Magyar Birds, Nemesis, and K2 are not only hunting infantry near the trenches. They are watching roads, tree lines, light vehicles, supply points, communication sites, and temporary staging areas across several fronts. For Russia, the problem is no longer just losing one soldier or one truck in a drone video. The deeper problem is movement itself. Daylight exposes the roads. Darkness no longer gives cover when thermal cameras are watching. And when a target appears, an FPV drone can arrive before that target disappears. Before going deeper, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Military Force for more clear analysis on the weapons, battles, and geopolitical shocks shaping today's war. So what happens when an army can no longer move without being seen? Ukraine's drone war is no longer built around one famous unit or one lucky strike. It is starting to look like a connected hunting system spread across several fronts, with different teams playing the same deadly game from different directions. Signum Battalion, Magyar Birds, Nemesis, and K2 may appear in separate videos, but the pattern behind their work is similar. A reconnaissance UAV watches the ground. A target is marked. An FPV or strike drone is sent in. After impact, another aircraft checks the damage and searches for activity. That rhythm matters because it turns scattered battlefield footage into something larger than a highlight reel. It shows a method built around speed, pressure, and constant observation. The Lyman Front gives one of the clearest examples of this method. Signum Battalion has become closely linked with drone operations in this sector, where forest strips, ruined houses, narrow roads, and small settlements make movement difficult but not invisible. In February, Ukrinform reported that Signum pilots used night FPV drones to disrupt a Russian advance on the Lyman front, hitting troops before they could build pressure against Ukrainian positions. The tactical message is simple. A Russian soldier does not need to reach a trench to become part of the fight. He can be spotted while crossing a tree line, leaving a shelter, or moving between buildings, and that first moment of exposure can bring a strike drone toward him. This is where the battlefield begins to shrink around the attacker. Farther south and east, the same logic appears across Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Luhansk, but the target list becomes wider. Magyar Birds, Nemesis, and K2 are not only looking for infantry. Their footage and reports show attacks against trucks, ATVs, locomotives, warehouses, logistics hubs, communication equipment, and temporary staging sites. Militarny reported that Ukraine's unmanned systems forces struck locomotives, warehouses, and communication centers over several days, while Nemesis pilots hit a drone landing site and UAV warehouse in the Zaporizhia region. This matters because every target behind the contact line supports someone at the front. A destroyed vehicle can delay soldiers. A damaged warehouse can cut supplies. A broken communication node can make orders slower. The drone does not only damage what it hits, it can disturb the system that keeps Russian attacks moving. This is why these operations should be viewed as a network, not as isolated clips. One unit may watch a forest road near Lyman, while another hits a storage point in Luhansk or a communication site in Zaporizhia. Each strike has its own local result, but together they create a wider pressure field. Russian commanders must think not only about Ukrainian artillery or minefields, but also about whether their routes, depots, vehicles, and staging areas are already under aerial observation. That creates hesitation. It slows planning. It forces smaller movements, more concealment, and more risk for every supply run. The deeper lesson is that Ukraine is building a battlefield where detection and attack are connected almost in real time. Drone crews do not need to hold every road with infantry. They only need enough eyes in the sky, enough pilots ready to launch, and enough targets forced to move through exposed space. Once that chain is working, the front is no longer a single line on a map. It becomes a moving trap, and any Russian unit that enters it may already be inside the next target cycle. That is the tactical foundation for the bigger problem Russia now faces. Russia is turning to motorcycles, ATVs, and light trucks because the old armored push has become easier to see and harder to protect. This is not a strange battlefield choice. It is an emergency adjustment to a war where large vehicles can be detected long before they reach the fight. A tank or armored personnel carrier brings firepower and protection, but it also brings noise, heat, dust, and a clear shape on the screen of a reconnaissance UAV. Once that vehicle is marked, FPV teams can wait for the right angle, hit the lead machine, block the route, and force the rest of the column into confusion. That is why Moscow is trying to move faster, smaller, and less predictably. Motorcycles now serve a very practical purpose for Russian assault groups. They allow soldiers to cross open gaps quickly, use narrow forest paths, and avoid the slow movement of armored columns. A rider can spread out from others, take a different line, and reach a tree belt before artillery or drone teams fully react. RUSI has noted that motorcycles and ATVs are returning to the battlefield because drones have changed how mechanized forces operate, and one widely cited estimate says tactical UAVs account for around 60 to 70% of damaged and destroyed Russian systems. That number explains the pressure behind the change. Russia is not using light vehicles because they are better than armor in every way. It is using them because armor is now expensive to risk in many small attacks. ATVs give Russian units a different kind of flexibility. They can move across rough ground, carry ammunition, support small assault teams, and help soldiers reach positions that trucks cannot easily enter. In theory, this helps Russia keep pressure on Ukraine without building one large target for Ukrainian drones. Reports have also described Russia expanding motorcycle training and using motorcycles, civilian vehicles, and mixed motorized groups across the front. But this adaptation has a hard limit. A small vehicle may be harder to track than a tank, yet the man riding it is far more exposed. There is no thick armor, no turret, and no real protection from fragments once a drone comes close. Light trucks and civilian-style vehicles create another trade-off. They can carry more people or supplies than a motorcycle, and they can blend better into damaged roads or built-up areas. But if one is found at the wrong moment, it becomes a concentrated target. A truck packed with soldiers can turn one FPV strike into a major loss, especially when passengers have little time to dismount or scatter. This is the brutal math of light mobility. It can reduce the chance of early detection, but it can also increase casualties when detection happens anyway. Speed helps only until the sky finds the route. The deeper issue for Russia is that smaller vehicles do not remove the drone threat. They only change the shape of the risk. Motorcycles can rush through a gap, ATVs can slip through rough terrain, and trucks can move along back roads, but all of them still depend on timing, concealment, and luck. If Ukrainian reconnaissance catches the movement, the advantage can vanish in seconds. Moscow is trying to survive the drone age by becoming lighter and faster. But that same choice is pushing more soldiers into the open with less protection. And once those soldiers are exposed, the next part of the battle depends on how quickly Ukraine can turn a sighting into a strike. Ukraine's strike chain becomes dangerous because it connects the eye in the sky with the weapon in the air almost immediately. A Russian unit may believe speed is the answer, but speed only matters if the movement is not detected. Once a reconnaissance UAV sees a small group crossing a field, entering a tree line, or stopping near a building, the clock starts. The drone crew does not need to guess where the soldiers may go hours later. It can follow the movement in real time, pass the picture to the strike team, and keep the target under watch until an FPV drone is ready to move. That is why every short trip near the front can become a race between concealment and response. The basic structure is simple, but the effect is severe. A reconnaissance UAV often stays higher and farther back, watching roads, forest edges, ruined houses, and suspected assembly points. When it detects motion, the information flows to operators who choose the best attack option. A strike drone then flies lower, using terrain and timing to close the distance. After the hit, the watching UAV does not disappear. It checks the result, searches for survivors, and looks for another vehicle or team trying to escape. This creates a cycle where one sighting can lead to one strike, and one strike can expose the next target. In that kind of fight, the first mistake can start a chain reaction. Fiber optic FPV drones are making this cycle harder to break. Traditional FPV drones depend on radio signals, and both sides have spent years trying to jam those links with electronic warfare. But fiber optic drones are different. They carry a thin cable behind them, and that cable keeps the control signal and video feed connected to the operator. This system uses fiber optic lines that can reach roughly 10 to 20 kilometers, which allows the drone to keep a stable image without relying on normal radio control. For a pilot, that means the picture can remain clear until the final seconds before impact. This does not mean fiber optic drones solve every problem for Ukraine. The cable adds weight, limits some movements, and can be damaged by terrain, trees, or obstacles. These drones also require careful handling because the line must unwind as the aircraft flies. But their battlefield value is still clear. In areas where electronic warfare is heavy, a regular FPV may lose signal before it reaches the target. A fiber optic model can continue forward even when jamming fills the air. That changes the danger for Russian troops who once trusted EW cover, forest routes, or broken urban ground to reduce the drone threat. The larger point is that Ukraine is not only improving the drone itself, it is improving the connection between detection, decision, and attack. Reconnaissance. UAVs provide the eyes. FPV crews provide the strike. Fiber optic control helps preserve the link when electronic warfare tries to cut it. Together, these parts create a faster and more reliable kill chain. For Russian soldiers, this means being seen is no longer just a warning sign. It can be the first step in a very short sequence that ends with a drone already closing in. And when that sequence becomes harder to interrupt, Ukraine can begin using drones not only to hit moving troops, but also to break the systems that support them. That support system is now one of Ukraine's main targets. The battle is no longer only about striking Russian soldiers as they move toward the front. Ukrainian drone units are also trying to weaken the parts of the Russian war machine that sit behind those soldiers. Ammunition stores, logistics hubs, UAV depots, landing sites, communication antennas, and temporary staging areas all matter because they help Russia prepare attacks. If these places are hit before an assault begins, the troops at the front may arrive with less support, fewer drones, weaker coordination, and a slower supply flow. That is where a small strike can create a larger battlefield effect. The strike by K2 against a Russian logistics hub in the Luhansk region shows why these targets matter. A logistics site is not just a building or a pile of equipment. It is a point where fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and military gear can be gathered before moving closer to the line. If a drone destroys that hub, the damage can spread beyond the blast area. A unit waiting for shells may receive fewer rounds. A vehicle team may lose repair material. Infantry may be forced to delay movement because supplies are no longer in place. In a war of pressure, delay can become its own kind of loss. Nemesis has also shown how Ukrainian drone teams are moving deeper into Russia's support structure. In Zaporizhia, reported strikes against a UAV depot and a landing site carried a clear tactical message. Ukraine is not only defending against Russian drones in the sky, it is trying to hit the places where those systems are stored, prepared, and launched. When a UAV warehouse is damaged, Russia may lose aircraft, parts, batteries, or control equipment. When a landing site is destroyed, operators may have to relocate, rebuild procedures, and accept more risk. That weakens Russia's ability to answer Ukrainian strikes with its own aerial pressure. communication targets are just as important as ammunition or drones. Nemesis attacks on antennas and communication centers in Donetsk and Zaporizhia point to a deeper goal: breaking the command link between Russian units. On the battlefield, orders must move fast. Artillery crews need target updates. Assault groups need directions. Drone teams need contact with observers. If a communication node is damaged, the front does not always collapse, but it can become slower and less organized. A few minutes of confusion can matter when troops are already moving under surveillance. This is how a strike on a metal antenna can affect men inside trenches kilometers away. Magyar Birds adds another layer by targeting transport and movement behind the fighting line. Reported strikes on locomotives or transport-related targets are important because rail and road links keep heavy equipment and supplies flowing toward active sectors. A locomotive does not need to be near a trench to matter. It may be part of the chain that brings ammunition, vehicles, fuel, or engineering material forward. When that chain is interrupted, Russia must find another route, wait for repairs, or shift cargo to less efficient transport. That creates friction, and modern war punishes any side that moves too slowly. This is the real meaning of Ukraine's wider drone campaign. It is not just hunting what can be seen at the front. It is cutting into the system that allows Russia to fight, move, communicate, and rebuild pressure after each failed attack. Soldiers may be the most visible targets, but warehouses, antennas, UAV depots, and staging areas decide whether those soldiers can keep advancing. If the front line is where Russian forces try to push forward, logistics and communications are what decide how long that push can continue. Ukraine is now hitting both, and that makes the next problem for Moscow even harder to hide. Open ground is no longer the only dangerous place for Russian troops. The harder lesson from these drone battles is that even cover is becoming weaker. A soldier may run across a field and clearly expose himself, but he may also crawl into bushes, hide inside a damaged house, or move along a tree line and still be found. That changes the old battlefield instinct. In past wars, a man under branches or behind a wall had a better chance of disappearing from enemy view. In Ukraine, that cover can become temporary at best, because the sky may keep watching long after the soldier believes he is safe. This is where fear begins to follow every movement. The problem becomes worse in broken terrain. Forest strips, village edges, ruined homes, and narrow paths can help soldiers avoid direct fire from the ground, but they also create predictable routes. If Russian troops want to move without armor, they often have to use the same belts of trees, the same gaps between houses, or the same dirt roads leading toward the front. Ukrainian reconnaissance, UAVs, can study those routes and wait for movement. A man lying still in a bush may look hidden from another soldier, but from above, one wrong shift can reveal his position. A person leaving a building at the wrong second can turn shelter into a trap. That is why the search from the air can be more patient than the man hiding below. Daylight makes this pressure easier to understand. Roads, fields, rooftops, tree shadows, and fresh tracks all give drone teams clues. A small group moving across open land can be seen from far away. A motorcycle leaving dust behind can show the path it has taken. A truck stopping near a structure can suggest that troops or supplies are inside. This does not mean every movement is detected, but it does mean the margin for error has become much smaller. Soldiers must think about distance, timing, route, noise, and exposure at the same time. The battlefield no longer punishes only the slow unit. It punishes the visible one. Night no longer solves the problem. Darkness once gave infantry a chance to cross dangerous ground, move supplies, or reach a new position while the enemy had less visibility. Thermal cameras have changed that calculation. A human body gives off heat, and on a cold screen, that heat can appear as a clear, moving shape. A soldier may believe he has disappeared into blackness, but the drone operator may see a bright mark moving through the dark. Even dawn and dusk are not safe windows if the area is already being watched. This is the cruel part of the new rhythm. The front does not fully sleep anymore. Ukraine's advantage in this model is speed joined with constant attention. A sighting can become a decision. A decision can become a launch. A launch can become an impact before the target finds better cover. After that, the same aerial view can keep scanning for survivors, medics, vehicles, or a second group trying to reach the same area. This does not require Ukraine to control every meter with infantry. It requires enough eyes, enough crews, and enough strike drones to make Russian movement feel unsafe across time and terrain. In such a war, control does not come only from tanks, artillery, or trenches. It comes from seeing first, striking first, and giving the enemy almost no time to vanish. That is the reality that leads directly to the final question of this battle. The drone war in Ukraine is now becoming a test of who can control movement faster. What is happening around Lyman, Donetsk, Zaporizhia, and Luhansk is not just a collection of strike videos. It shows a wider shift in modern combat, where the side that sees first can often decide the fight before the enemy reaches the main line. For Russia, the danger is no longer limited to losing one motorcycle, one ATV, one truck, or one storage point. The bigger problem is that every step forward now carries a higher cost. Troops must move under observation. Supply routes must survive drone patrols. Communication sites must stay active while being hunted. Even small delays can weaken an attack before it becomes serious. Moscow will not stand still. Russian forces will keep changing tactics, spreading units out, improving camouflage, adding electronic warfare, and using more light vehicles to avoid large losses. But Ukraine is also adapting with fast reconnaissance, FPV teams, fiber optic drones, thermal cameras, and a growing habit of attacking the support system behind the assault. That is why the next phase of this fight may not be decided by one village or one dramatic strike. It may be decided by which side can link drones, data, pilots, logistics, and battlefield decisions into the fastest chain. In this kind of war, a few seconds of exposure can decide whether a unit survives or disappears. For more clear analysis on the weapons, battles, and geopolitical shocks shaping today's war, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Military Force.